Hello, reporter room investigators. Come on in, come on in. Happy Saturday to you and yours. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. We all watched the hearing. We had a lot of different takeaways from it. And today we're going to be talking about the motive in this case. I've seen a lot of you guys asking me in the comment section, what was his motive? What was his motive? So we're going to talk about the motives behind the crimes committed on November 13th of 2022. We're going to discuss and we're going to look at photographs of Bryan Kohberger's high school crush, a cheerleader that looks a lot like Maddie and Kaylee. The real reason that the KBAR knife was selected, and it's not what you think. We're going to talk about the Pappa Rogers account, BK's ongoing problems with females, his connections. Yes, there are connections to the victims, his TapaTalk posts and what they reveal, and also the how-to essay, which and a very bizarre lecture that I think goes to motive. Let me know what you think. Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty. He has not had his day in court yet. And my name is Jessica Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you have not subscribed to Reporter Room, it's free. So please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and you guys know that everything I'm sharing is my opinion, and you know I like to get right into it. So let's get started.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Davies.
Okay, so we're going to just start by just saying that Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty. Come on in and tell me where you are from. I'm going to check in with chat in just a few minutes. But today we're going to be talking about the motive at the 1122 King Road house and the information that I believe is going to be presented to the jury at the trial. So we're going to be talking about the arrest of Bryan Kohberger. It came as a shock, but it also made sense. This is according to his former high school administrator, who removed Bryan Kohberger, kicked him out basically of a law enforcement vocational program. And she said in a new interview that, and Bryan is innocent until proven guilty, but she said that many profilers, have described him as an incel. Now we're going to talk about Bryan. Are they right? Are they wrong? We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's high school crush. It's a cheerleader that looks a lot like Maddie and Kaylee, in my opinion. Anyway, let me know what you think. We're going to go through, look at pictures of her and talk about her in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about the real reason that the KBAR knife was selected. We're going to talk about ongoing issues with females, his connection to the victims, his TapaTalk posts, and this odd lecture that I think links back to motive. Let me know if you have a different take on it. And then his how-to essay, which is coming into trial. So I believe that this is the case that's going to be put together, in my opinion, by the prosecution. So for those of you that don't know, the term incel simply stands for involuntary celibate. Now, to be clear, not everybody who's voluntarily or involuntarily celibate has these tendencies. This is a group of extremists, but there's an incel group that exists almost entirely online, and I believe this links back to Elliot Rogers and the Pappa Rogers account. And I'm going to tie it all together. Just allow me to set the table here. It was made up by individuals that struggle to acquire, to get into romantic relationships. I'm watching my words here. And researchers say that the members of an incel community typically blame females for their disenfranchisement, which has led some incels to engage in acts of DV and other forms of V toward women in retaliation for supposed harms that they have caused to men. Now, to be clear, again, most people who are celibate, either voluntarily or involuntary, don't bother anyone. This is an extremist group. But I want to set the table on how BK allegedly went from being a troubled teenager to being culpable, to being accused, to doing away with Ethan, Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana. So he was already having trouble with females in class. So we're going to talk about his high school crush. We're going to look at pictures of her, and you guys can tell me if you think she looks a lot like Kaylee and Maddie. We're going to talk about the real reason that Bryan Kohberger chose the KBAR knife, the Pappa Rogers account and Elliot Rogers, his ongoing problems with females, his connections to the victims. Yes, there are connections. His bizarre TapaTalk posts, and the lecture, which I think goes to motive. I want to hear what you think about this. So let's start with just let me set the table, and then we're going to go right into the cheerleader part. So let me just talk about how he was having trouble. Let me put this in. Okay, so my source on this is the Idaho Statesman, and Bryan Kohberger was already having trouble. Now, there was an investigation that took place into the incident, which Tanya Carmela Beers labeled as pretty serious in an interview with the Idaho podcast. I'm watching my words. Now, she did not want to elaborate because of the federal Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act protections, but the investigation led to BK's being removed from his high school program, his law enforcement program that he was enrolled in his sophomore year, and he had to finish out his classes online. So the law enforcement focus at Monroe Career and Technical Institute in Eastern Pennsylvania, it was the program that he was in. Now, she oversaw this technical school's mental health and discipline. So this was, would have, if she was the go-to person if there was an issue. Now, she reiterated that she was not going to divulge details of the incident. However, she said it was not medication, I'm watching my words, or alcohol related, not in nature, nor did it involve academic integrity or cheating issues. She declined to identify the number of students involved, but said that the complaint about BK was not filed by a group of individuals. The podcast reported that the complaint involved female students, and this goes back to him being a sophomore in high school. And we also know that he was being reprimanded at WSU for also having difficulties with WSU female students. He was allegedly grading them differently than he was grading male students. So was there a misogynistic inborn hatred toward women? And is this lead to what happened on November 13th of 2022. I also want to share with you why I think that date of all the dates is significant in just a moment. So please stay with me. So she said that he denied the allegation against him. He was steadfast that he did not do it. But it doesn't sound like they believed him, because then he had to switch to HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning program at the half-day technical school for his junior year. And there was no additional incidents or complaints filed against BK the next year. And that's probably because he had to finish his classes, in my opinion, online. So if you want to know more about this, you can look it up on the Idaho Statesman. So let's get into the next piece, because I have 10 packages and we have a lot of stuff to get through. Okay. So I want to talk about the cheerleader that BK had a crush on. And then we're going to talk about his connections to the victims, Pappa Rogers, Elliot Rogers, the real reason that the KBAR knife was selected, the bizarre TapaTalk post, and then this lecture, which I think helps to go to motive. So let's talk about his high school crush, who was named Kimberly. Let me grab that. Okay. I have so many packages ready to go. All right. So this is a picture of Kimberly in high school, and next to her you can see is Bryan Kohberger. So this, if you look at Kimberly, I think she looks very similar to Maddie and Kaylee. She's got light hair, a very similar nose, in my opinion, to Maddie. Let me know what you think. So let's talk about what happened. And here's what she looked like at the time of the crimes. So her name is Kimberly Kenley. She was 27 years old at the time of this, and she was contacted by the Bureau shortly after learning that BK had been arrested for doing away with 4 students in Idaho. So the two of them were classmates together at Pleasant Valley Intermediate School in Brodhead, Pennsylvania. And she told the FBI whatever she could tell them. This is according to her mother, Sandra. Now, my sourcing on this is the Daily Mail. And this is a picture of her in high school, and this is a picture of Bryan Kohberger. So I do think she looks, in my opinion, has very similar bone structure, especially to Maddie. But let me know what you think about this. So he had a huge crush on Kimberly, and she was a cheerleader. Her name was Kimberly Kennelly, and she had some awkward, as she describes it, schoolyard encounters with Bryan Kohberger, among several bizarre tales that we have learned from former friends, from the girl that he went out on Tinder with. We know that a Tinder warrant was pulled for Bryan Kohberger, and witnesses in recent days that paint a picture of a very troubled and disgruntled young man or young student who did not fit in to his high school. And did this carry over into a motive for these crimes? Again, he's innocent until proven guilty. Now, classmates revealed that Bryan Kohberger was heavy set, and you can see he is much heavier here. And the result of that, and you know how cruel kids can be, he was the subject of bullying and cruel taunts in school. This is what one of his classmates who did not want to be identified told the Daily Mail. He said, quote, "The whole clique of popular girls made fun of him in school. They were cheerleaders, the ones that every kid had crushes on. They were making fun of him." And BK did seem to turn his life around in high school. He took up boxing, he lost some weight, and his friend described him as, quote, being a totally different person. He worked out constantly, but he became super aggressive. He described BK as having a short fuse and was constantly trying to change his style and personality to fit in with the clique. So we can see a picture of somebody who wasn't fitting in, that was being bullied. And I'm not saying that Kimberly did this. I just want to make that clear. I haven't seen any evidence that it was Kimberly. She's the one that he really had a crush on. And I just thought it was interesting when I looked at her picture, how much, in my opinion, she looks like Maddie and Kaylee. But his friend said he had a short fuse and was constantly trying to fit in. And another classmate added, quote, "It's interesting to me that the girls he's accused of doing away with," and I'm watching my words here, "were nice looking and seemingly popular, much like the ones that made fun of him in childhood." So does this go down to a motive? Now we're going to talk about the real reason that a KBAR knife was used, his ongoing problems with females, his connections. Yes, he does have connections to the victims. I'm going to prove it to you. His bizarre TapaTalk post, and this lecture, which I think goes to motive. And also we're going to talk about Pappa Rogers and Elliot Rogers. So let's next talk about Elliot Rogers. I do want to get your opinion though. Do you think that Kimberly looks like Maddie? Let me see if I have a picture of her handy that I can pull up. Who did this? And that there's Maddie. Okay, let me. Individuals was found under. There's Maddie. And then this is Kimberly. My computer's thinking about it. There it is. Okay, then that's Kimberly. And I think that they both have light hair. They both have a similar nose and bone structure, a smaller chin, very straight, cute little pinched nose. I think he has a type. So let's continue on together though, because we have a lot of stuff to unpack. So let me grab this. Okay, so we talked about Elliot Rogers a little bit, and we know in the affidavit that page 118 was highlighted. And now I believe that the prosecution is going to show that this is the Elliot Rogers manifesto. And I believe that this, and some people believe, I do too. I was in a Facebook group, I'm still in it. And I left it for a little bit. I went back to it. I did get creeped out with the Pappa Rogers account. And so let's look at page 118 and see if how this relates to motive. And then we're going to talk about the lecture that I also think relates to motive, and then the real reason that the KBAR knife was chosen. So this is the manifesto. Let me make sure we're all looking. Let me move myself out of the way here. Okay, and let me see if I can make this bigger for you guys. That made it worse. Okay. Nope, I can't make it. I made it a little bit wider. I think I did make it wider. Okay. So let's go to this page. All right. So this is the page of this is the Elliot Rodger manifesto, and this goes back to the Incel movement that we talked about, and we're going to talk about Stacy's and Chad's in just a moment, so please stay with me. But this page in particular, I think, is what there's one line that was underlined, and I'm going to show you which line I believe it was. So it says how wicked and degenerate women really are, how people on that website have extremely stupid opinions, and I found it frustrating. This is written by Elliot Rogers. And had really stupid opinions that I found very frustrating, but I found a few to be quite insightful. The website PUA Hate is very depressing. It shows how bleak and cruel the world is due of the evilness of women. So again, this particular extremist group of incels blames women for all their troubles. I guess it's an easy way to absolve themselves of any responsibilities of why maybe they can't get into a healthy relationship with somebody. He said, I tried to show it to my parents. This is Elliot Rogers talking here, to give them some sort of dose of reality as to why I'm so miserable. They never understood why I'm so miserable. They have always had the delusion that everything is going well for me, especially my father. When I sent the link of puahate.com to my parents, none of them even bothered to look at the post. And I can see Bryan Kohberger really being able to identify this for this because he talked about in the TapaTalks, and we're going to look at those in just a second, so please stay with me, but he talks about the TapaTalks, how he was, having seen his father was a good man, but not feeling anything for him. So I'm just wondering if he wasn't able to relate with this guy. So he goes on, he talks about the spring season was spent in absolute despair. And we're just going to read this one page, and I'm going to show you what I believe is underlined. With other young people, lived healthy lives of pleasure, and summer arrived. Summer's even worse than spring, especially in Santa Barbara. Flocks of hot young girls go out in their shorts and bikinis. Further tantalizing, I'm not going to say this. Every time I look at them, knowing that they gleefully show off their forms, yet they would never give me a chance to be their boyfriend, only increase my already boiling hatred towards all women. And my pushback on this is, gee, maybe they could pick up on that. Maybe they didn't feel like you liked women. Women are we're perceptive. Maybe you weren't treating women very well, could that be part of it also? I could not leave my apartment without seeing at least a few of them. So lots and lots of, just pile on. So he says, this is what Elliot Rogers says, I have nothing left to live for but revenge. Women must be punished for their crimes of rejecting a magnificent gentleman as myself. So again, Elliot Rogers, in my opinion, takes no responsibility for the fact that he's being rejected. It's, and not only that, he goes a step further that women should be punished for this. So he, waxes on about, how he's the victim, poor him. But I think this is the line that we're going to see. I think this is the line that was underlined, and it's right here at the bottom. It says, the day of retribution would have to be a normal party weekend. And you'll remember that weekend, the University of Idaho was having a big party. They had a big football game that weekend. And you'll also remember that the 1122 King Road home had a party at the home on the 11th and overnight into the 12th of November. So just one day before these crimes were committed. And this is why I think Bryan Kohberger underlined it, in my opinion, allegedly. So he said, I said it for a time during November of 2013. Now, obviously, Bryan Kohberger couldn't jump into a time machine and go back to November of 2013. So I believe that he picked his day of retribution to be a party weekend in November, on November 13th of 2022. And I believe that this is the line that we're going to find out is underlined for page 118 that was talked about in the affidavit. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But I believe this is what I believe this is what the prosecution is going to be presenting to the jury. Let me check in with chat, and then I'm going to check in with chat. I still have so much stuff to go through. I have 10 packages. We're going to talk about the real reason that the KBAR knife was selected, his connections to the victims, his TapaTalk posts, and this lecture, which I think goes to the motive. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. Let me just say hello to chat, and then we're going to dive into all of that. I do want to also welcome our new channel member, Patricia Warner. Congratulations and welcome to Reporter Room. I'm so happy you're part of our family. Thank you. Welcome, Driller. I'm so happy to have you as a part of the Reporter Room family. Welcome, Kathleen, as a Reporter Room member. So glad you are here. Kathy C., thank you so much for joining. I'm really, really grateful to have you as part of the Reporter Room family. Thank you, Njaz, for gifting a Reporter Room membership. That is so nice of you. Thank you so much. And if you got that, please let me know who you are. And thank you to Brother Mike for your $1.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. That is really, really generous of you. Come on in. Tell me where you're from. And let me catch up with chat here just for a second. And then we're going to dive into, there's a lot to unpack. I still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 packages to go through. But I want to show you guys what I think the prosecution is going to show the jury, so as how it goes to motive. Obviously, this isn't everything. So I want to say thank Leslie for modding today. Thank you, Njaz, for modding today. Njaz is our head mod, along with Brother Mike, also a head mod. Thank you guys for modding, and thank you, Holly, for modding. So come on in, tell me where you're from. Hi, Adriana and Christy. Hi, Wicked. Suede said, yeah, obsession. Absolutely. Thanks for modding, Wicked. Hi, Trina. Thanks for modding today, Holly. Dion says, totally obsessed. Yeah, I think so too. And I think this started with this high school girl. I think it started with Kimberly. And I think it spiraled from there, in my opinion, allegedly. Shelly, thank you so much for modding. Welcome all. Please give this a thumbs up. Yeah, please let YouTube know I am doing a G-rated show. I am talking about some stuff, but I am going to be using language that is G-rated because if you have little ones in the room, I want to be respectful of that and also of this platform that I'm on. Yeah, we're back, Susan. I'm glad you're here. Adrian says, some type of girl, happy blonde, sweet face. Right, exactly. And I think that the reason that the date of November 13th of 2022 was selected was a nod to Elliot Rogers. And I think the reason that Maddie and Kaylee were picked out was because of Kimberly. That they resembled Kimberly, someone who he wanted to be with, that he had a big crush on, and so he took his anger out on them, in my opinion. Hey, MS, thank you for being number 85 to hit the thumbs up. Thank you, G of Twins, for being 105 to hit the thumbs up. Hey, Pepper, thank you for modding. So I'm glad you guys are here. Kathleen does think they look similar. I'm curious, if you think that Kimberly looks similar to Maddie or Kaylee, put a 1 in the chat. If you think Kimberly looks completely different to Maddie and Kaylee, put a 2 in the chat. Just curious what you guys think about that. Let me see. Should I put up a picture of Kimberly again? I mean, you guys saw it. If you didn't see it, you can back up the chat a little bit. Shelley thinks it's interesting that Elliot Rogers had a childhood friend whose name was Maddie. Oh, wow. That is interesting. And I think that this would have made it, the fact that I just feel like this date was chosen, that it was a hat tip, in my opinion, from Bryan Kohberger to Elliot Rogers, that the day of retribution would have been a party weekend, which that's what that was on November 13th. That was a big party weekend. University of Idaho had a big football game, and that house was known as the 1122 King Road house. That was known as a party house. We've all seen the body cam footage where law enforcement is responding to noise complaints for parties, and in one of them, none of the roommates were even home. That's how, and there was a party there that began on November 11th and went into the overnight of November 12th. So the day before all of this happened, because we know that, they were all out and they got back to the house between midnight and 2 a.m. And that was on the, beginning on the 12th of November and going into the overnight of the 13th. And we know that the crime was committed on the 13th. And I believe it was specifically meant to occur on the 13th and not the 12th. And not another weekend. It had to be that weekend, in my opinion, because this was a hat tip to Elliot Rogers. He wanted the party weekend, he wanted November, and he wanted the number 13. He couldn't get it in a time machine and go back to 2013, but he could choose the 13th day of the month. And I believe that that is why also the Pappa Rogers account used, I think that was also a hat tip to Elliot Rogers. And I think that Bryan Kohberger was in that chat in the University of Idaho discussion Facebook group, which is a great Facebook group. Okay, so Brother Mike wants to know, does she have good birthing hips? Well, we all heard about that horrible comment that Bryan Kohberger made. So, yeah. Barbara says she does look similar, she thinks. I'm curious what you guys think. Dorothy thinks they look similar. So put a 1 in the chat if you think they look similar, and put a 2 in the chat if you think they do not look similar. I'm just curious and just want to get take a temperature, see where we're at. Hey, Betsy. Hi, Christy. Poco put it a 1. Who's Kimberly? She is the cheerleader that Bryan Kohberger had a big crush on in high school. Should I put her picture up? Would that be helpful? If you guys are trying to answer this, let me pop her photo up. Hold on 1 second. Let me grab it. Okay. Let me share this instead. So this is Kimberly. Okay. This is Kimberly, and this is Maddie. Maddie's fingernail. And then this is Kimberly. I think they, I'm going to hear what you guys think. I think there is a similarity. So let's see what you guys said. 1. So I hope I've answered your question. This is Kimberly. And I want to be clear that there's no evidence that Kimberly herself directed anything negative toward Bryan Kohberger. There were students that were making fun of her. There's no evidence that Kimberly was one of them. So I just want to put that out there. She didn't like him, but that, that happens all the time in school, right? Tracy thinks it's a 1. Kathleen thinks it's a 1. Leslie puts 1. Brenda thinks 1 that they are. So we're putting a 1 if you think they look similar, a 2 if you think they are not similar. Nick says 1. Christy says 1. Zio 6 says 1. Susan 1. Matthew thinks it's a 2. Jackie says 1. Betsy says, I've never seen Kimberly. Well, hopefully my putting this up here will help with that. Betsy, thanks for letting me know. Betty put in a 1. Thanks for modding today. Dabs put in 1. Thanks for modding, Dabs. Dorothy put in a 1. Shadow thinks it's a 2. Leslie put in a 1. Thank you for modding today. And Jazz. Adriana says 1. Veronica says, yes, please. Yeah, so I put that up, Veronica. I'm glad you're here. Barbara put in a 1. Michelle says 2. I don't know. Mac Pigeon. Hope I'm saying it right. Mac Pigeon put in a 2. Betsy, okay. Barbara said 1, and Jess says 1. Avocado Toast says 1. Hey, Tara. Tara says 1. Brother Mike said, I'm close enough. Hey, Brenda. Holly put in a 2. Jet said, I have to rewind to look at the picture of Kimberly. Well, I have it up now, so hopefully that helps. Susan says, my high school boyfriend of 3 years was mentally, I broke away from him to this day. He still tries to get with me. It's very creepy. Yeah, that would be creepy. So, Rick, hopefully I've answered that question. I have Kimberly up here. She was a cheerleader at BK's high school. Thanks for modding today, Pepper and Mike. Mike said, I think his birthday was coming. His dad was coming. He was out of time that night. He was determined. Thank you, Mac Pigeon. Yeah, definitely a hop tip, in my opinion, to Elliot Rogers. Yeah, Holly's glad you got rid of that guy. Brenda says, Kimberly was a girlfriend from high school that BK had a crush on and wanted to be with. Yeah, she was a very popular cheerleader. You could see she has dimples, a big smile, and I think she's similar in bone structure to Maddie. Obviously, she's a lot younger in this photograph, but I think she's similar. Tammy thinks it's a 2. Rodney says, if BK walks, there's no way to step to civil court or federal court, no doubt double jeopardy in those venues. Thank you for sharing that. Dion said he was determined, spinning out of control. Welcome, Tammy. I'm glad you're here. And Shadow agrees you could be right about the date. Trina put a 1. Sherry put a 1. Brenda put a 1. Shadow says 2. Mac Pigeon says 2. Rick says, was Kimberly the girl who gave him a ride in the old rug days? No, not that I know of. Kimberly says Shannon, thank you so much for the $5 super sticker. Shannon says they're all out of his league, mostly personality wise. And I'm wondering that too, if like at what point do people have to assume some kind of responsibility that maybe, you can't get with somebody like this because of how you're behaving toward them. I mean, we've heard, Bryan Kohberger texting a girl that she had nice birthing hips. I mean, did he really think that was a positive thing? Of course he knew that was rude. He meant it to be rude. He meant it, in my opinion, to be unkind. Victoria put in a 2. Marcus said, hey folks, was in the middle of some spring cleaning, took a break. Well, I'm glad you're here. And Sherry said a 1. All right, so let's continue on together because we have a lot of stuff to unpack here. So we're going to talk about incels for just a second, and then we're going to dig into, because I do think we're going to talk about this, the KBAR knife. Oh, I want to talk about the real reason that the KBAR knife, there is a reason that particular knife was selected. We're going to talk about his connections to the victims. He does have connections, his TapaTalk posts, the lecture he attended, and how that goes to motive. So let's talk about Incel just quickly. And possibly, in my opinion, Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty, but how he would have viewed if page 118 really is this manifesto from Elliot Rodger, then I think he would have viewed people in this way. So basically, this is they break this down into calling females Stacy and males Chad. And it's a way to kind of depersonalize someone, isn't it? To just, put them all together like that. But attractive women are referred to as Stacy's. They're both the object of desire and ridicule, because in this extremist world, Stacy's will always choose a Chad over the incels. And the Chad is a character of a man who's successful in getting into relationships with beautiful young women. And many incels believe themselves to be genetically inferior to Chads. He's always depicted as a successful guy with swaths of blonde hair, big muscles, showing off green trousers. He has a sports car. So, sounds like a Ken doll almost. And they're particularly drawn to this nihilistic black pill theory. Now, the idea that they're the only ones who realize that the game of attraction, I'm watching my words here, is rigged from birth. So, anyone who interacts with women is instantly branded as a fake cell, meaning a fake incel. So, I think that's, very, very interesting. All right, so let's talk about Bryan's connections to the victims, and then we're going to talk about why this particular knife was chosen, as I think there's a reason. So I just wanted to show that he was messaging these young women on Instagram. He slid into the DMs of several of Kaylee and Maddie. And basically it was just like him saying, "Hey, how are you?" But he did it over and over and over again. And my sourcing on this is People. It was also covered by Dateline NBC, and it's also been talked about by Christy and Steve Gonzalez, who saw the account. We know that Meta is the parent company for Instagram, right? And Meta is also the parent company of Facebook, and there was a Meta warrant that was issued. So we don't know anything more about that Meta warrant, but I believe it's going to show that he did have connections to the victims. Now, I always have people come into the chat and tell me that the prosecution said that there was no connections to the victims. The prosecution has not said that. Ann Taylor claimed this early on, almost 2 years ago. And Taylor claimed that there were no connections to the victims. But at the same time she's claiming this, she's also claiming that she hasn't gone through what was then 51 terabytes of information. She needed extensions more time. So just because she didn't know about the connections doesn't mean they weren't there. And even in the last hearing, she was still claiming she hadn't gone through everything. And now I think it's 68 terabytes of information that's been turned over to her from the prosecution. So we don't know why Maddie didn't message him, but what I think he started off as, an infatuation. See, I think Maddie's nose is very similar to Kimberly, the girl I showed you. I think, a very, very similar look, pointed chin, similar nose, just similar oval face. I do think there's a resemblance. And so I don't know what you guys think, but it's okay. We don't all have to agree. We're not going to all agree on everything. All right, so let's continue on with the incel. Okay, so Bryan Kohberger was at this lecture, and I think this is going to go to motive, in my opinion, because what in the world was he doing at a Margaret Atwood lecture? And my source on this is The Independent. But you don't have to take my word for it, because that is his picture right there. That's him right in the front row at a Margaret Atwood lecture. So why was he so interested? Well, she wrote the book called The Handmaid's Tale. And the book addresses a lot of misogynistic information. So we're going to talk about the KBAR knife and then BK's TapaTalk in just a second. But I think that the reason that he was at this lecture was because he was looking. I think he was always looking. So he was looking around at females. He thought females would be there. But I also think that he would have been very interested in The Handmaid's Tale. If you haven't seen that series, it's out on Hulu. It's a great book as well. But he would have been interested in exploring the issues of misogyny, patriarchy, and feminism, which is what Margaret Atwood goes into. And he's sitting here in the front row, and you can see around him, it's all women. I think there's one other guy seated in the back right here and one right here. But and I think this is a male. I think it is, but mostly it's mostly women seated, and he's in the front row. So I think, this is going to be presented, I think, at the trial. I think it's going to be circumstantial and for motive. And now the prosecution, to be clear, they don't have to show a motive, but juries like to know why. They want to know why. I mean, I think as human beings, we're curious. We want to know Why? So why was he at this Margaret Atwood lecture? The other thing that we learned is that BK boasted about his skills cutting fish and being a meat wrapper. Now, people said he didn't work as a fish filleter for very long. So, okay, but he did work as a butcher. So he's worked at a fishing job and at BJ's Wholesale Club as a butcher. And if you think about what happened to Buddy the dog and the fact that there were animal hairs found at BK's Pullman apartment, I think it's possible. I'm not saying it's a speculation alert here, but I do think it's possible that Buddy the dog relates back to Bryan Kohberger. We know people who commit crimes like this, like Ted Bundy. I listed out a bunch of you guys in one of the other ones. I think that they start with animals. So that's all I'm going to say on that. I want to keep it G-rated. But he also wrote, now, so Ann Taylor's claiming that he doesn't have the dexterity to commit a crime like this, but he writes here, I was a boxer and I'm still a runner. I believe dedication and perseverance are the most important skills learned from my activities. I lost 130 pounds at age 15 into age 16. And I believe this is proof I have the required dedication to be successful. So this is my words. These are his words. And then this is the iconic photo. This photo was taken, and the two roommates, Dylan and Bethany, were on either side of this. But this photo was uploaded by Kaylee on Instagram just hours before they were done away with. This was one of the final photos that was taken of the Idaho 4. All right, let's keep going because we have a lot of stuff to get into. Let me grab the next one. Okay. So again, I just want to talk about motive a little bit. So here we have, another instance of Bryan Kohberger. My sourcing on this is Oxygen True Crime, but there are other sources too. Fox News did a story on this as well. The 3 students stepped forward to report that they may have seen Bryan Kohberger last year at the University of Idaho. Now, he did not go to the University of Idaho. He didn't go there. He went to, so there's been like some confusion about that sometimes in the comment section too. He attended the Washington State University and he was a teaching assistant also at Washington State University. So why was he in the student union in the cafeteria at the University of Idaho? I believe this is going to also another connection, in my opinion, to the victims. Why was he there? So a sophomore named Chelsea told People magazine she believed she saw Kohberger, who had been a PhD student at the nearby Washington State University. She believes she saw him at University of Idaho Union Building, quote, really early in the semester. She says, quote, he was at the food court of the student union drinking water. He sat by himself. So, was he looking around? Was he hunting or was he watching someone in particular? Allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty, but she described Bryan Kohberger as allegedly the type to stare. And this is where I push back a little bit on the autism diagnosis. I just wonder how accurate that really is. I know the prosecution wants to have an independent expert look at this diagnosis, and maybe it doesn't really even matter at this point, but people with autism tend not to want to make eye contact. This guy liked to stare. She says, quote, he wouldn't look away if you caught him staring. That's also unusual for somebody with autism. She said he wanted you to notice he was looking at you. He didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't say anything, just stared. So Chelsea said that the brief encounter left her feeling unnerved. She said, I told my friend not to be suspicious, but to look at him because the eye contact was making me uncomfortable. Again, people with autism don't usually like to make eye contact. So I don't know what you guys think about the autism diagnosis. She said, it was so weird. We ended up leaving and eating outside because we want to get away from him. And another unidentified student told People that she had seen BK around campus more than once, and she thought he went to school there. She said, it's not a huge school. It's like a small town. So you start seeing the same faces again and again. They become familiar. So this is a completely different student. And she said, I definitely saw him more than once. He was really quiet, really intense, staring. He made me uncomfortable. And then we have this account. And I think all of this is going to go in to show a motive. So this is not the first report that BK's awkward social interactions may have unsettled others, because we have, shortly after his arrest, we have the owners of the Seven Sirens Brewing Company in Pennsylvania, where BK was living with his parents, told NBC News that BK had been a customer at the brewery while attending DeSales University, and that female staff, so not one female staff, had complained about BK's behavior, even making a note in their system that popped up when his ID was scanned. They had a note on him. The staff put it in there. This is according to the owner. It said, hey, this guy makes creepy comments. Keep an eye on him. He'll have 2 or 3 beers and then just get a little too uncomfortable. And according to his account, BK, this is the owner of the Seven Sirens, he said BK also allegedly asked the female staff and customers probing questions like where they lived and would get upset if they blew him off. So he wasn't. So what I'm wondering is if this doesn't show on some level, if what started out as an infatuation with Maddie then turned into when he was approaching her on Instagram and she wasn't answering him, and maybe he went in and approached her at the University of Idaho too when she wasn't responding, because Maddie had a boyfriend named Jake. She was in a relationship. Maybe that he also got upset with Maddie. So I do think that this goes to motive, in my opinion. Let me know if you have a different take on it. Okay, so I want to talk about the real reason that the KBAR knife was chosen. And we're going to talk about the TapaTalks. Okay, let's do the TapaTalks really quick. Let me move myself out of the way, and then we're going to go into the KBAR knife next. Okay, so we're going through, if you're just joining me, we're talking about Bryan Kohberger. We're going to go through the TapaTalks, and then we're going to talk about the real reason that the KBAR knife was chosen. I've told you guys the real reason why I believe that November 13th of 2022 was chosen. It was a party weekend. November would have been a salute to Elliot Rogers. The 13th, because he did it in 2013, would have also been a salute to Elliot Rogers. And the fact that it was a big party weekend at the college would have also been a nod, in my opinion, to Elliot Rogers. Okay, so on the TapaTalk, we know from his TapaTalk post, and this is Bryan Kohberger's account. Let me move myself out of the way so you guys can see that. So if you look here, this is Bryan Kohberger, and this is his account. So let me just move myself. If I'm really in the way. Okay, you can see it. All right, so this is odd. And okay, so he said, I have this horrible depersonalization to go on in my life for almost 2 years. I find myself making often found myself making simple human interactions, but it's as if I'm playing a role, playing games such as Oblivion. I can see what's going on. I'm slightly into it, but I can pause the game and focus on my real life. In this case, my life is the game, and my old self can be reached by pausing the game, but how? I often think of things that humans do, things I've done my whole life. I feel like an organic sack of meat with no self-worth, and I'm starting to view everyone as this. And I think the fact that he's not just viewing himself as an organic sack of meat, but the fact that he's starting to view other people as organic sacks of meat is really concerning. And I just wanted to share it. This is his handle, XR, those with visual snow. So he said, everything I've done makes no sense. How did things get this way? I'm wearing this shirt and decided that humans shall wear shirts. Who decided humans will wear shirts like this? Are we just advanced animals with possession? Or is there more that I can't see? I can't connect. I view everything as I would if I were playing Oblivion. Pointless and full of nothing, out of reality. I am moving out of my house. My last holidays were already lived, but where was I? As my family group hugs and celebrates, I am stuck in this void of nothing, feeling completely no emotion, feeling nothing. I feel dirty, like there's dirt inside my head, my mind. I am always dizzy and confused. I feel no self-worth. I'm intelligent, but I feel the opposite. I say things I don't mean. The last holiday in my house that I grew up in, the house I contributed to, the house I once felt at home in, is past. As I hug my family, I look into their faces. I see nothing. It's like I'm looking at a video game, but less. I feel like I'm mentally damaged. It's like I have severe brain damage. I believe him. I believe that he feels nothing when he looks at his family. I believe that he feels like he has severe brain damage. He said, I'm stuck in the depths of my mind where I have to constantly battle my demons. I believe him, where he has to constantly battle his demons. Am I here or am I fake? I feel myself slipping away. I hear screams faintly, but I constantly battle away from it. I'm wondering what he's hearing, like who is screaming. What if I let go? Where would I be? Would I ever come back to reality? I try to remember where I originated from, but I can't. I can barely remember my childhood. I I think about my father, what a good man he is, how I treat him like dirt because I have this condition and I can't take it. I might spiral control and lose myself in the void. I can't let it all go. All of these regrets. I predict for my future self all of these thoughts of remorse. I got this when I was in my stage of discovery. Now I look in the mirror and I see this sickly, tired, useless, and stupid man in the mirror. He is a complete disgrace. He doesn't deserve to live. I remember when I was 15. So nothing I do is enjoyable. I am blank. I have no opinion. I have no emotion. I have nothing. Can you relate? So this is him trying to figure things out, as a teenager when he wrote this. And this is a post that he did on July 5th in 2011. So he would have been a teenager here. And he's trying to figure it out. But I think it's really concerning that he doesn't see himself, um, as a human being. But it's even more concerning, in my opinion, that he's viewing other people as a sack of meat. And this is a form of depersonalization. And we can see, in my opinion, motive. And that's what we're talking about today, right? We can see this motive starting to develop in his teenage years from this unrequited crush that he had on the cheerleader, Kimberly, that turned into hatred, to his problems with women when he was in um, the military program that he was, and he had to, drop out and finish classes online. Uh, we can see that he begins by studying psychology, right? That's what he starts discover when he first starts college. He's going into psychology, and it's interesting that both of his sisters have psychology degrees. And then ultimately he moves on to criminology. Now, I believe when he was studying psychology, he was trying to learn about himself. He was trying to learn, why did he feel so different from other people? But when he moved into criminology, I think it shifted. And I think that at that point he began delving into an interest in criminals, interest in crimes, and why people commit crimes, and how, you know, and I think he, maybe learned how he could do this, become a better, criminal. I think his ultimate goal, this is my opinion, let me know if you have a different take on it, but I think allegedly he's innocent until proven guilty. If he did this, his goal was to make himself infamous and to be like a BTK and be like Ted Bundy, which brings me to the real reason that he chose the KBAR knife. So I think that BK could have picked any type of knife, right? There's lots of knives on Amazon, and but he went on Amazon and he specifically chose a KBAR knife to use. And I think he was this was going to be his calling card, in my opinion. Let me know if you think something, but I think just like Ted Bundy and just like BTK nicknamed himself, I think the KBAR, which has the K and the B, is just his initials written backwards. And I think BK is the KB killer with a K, the KB killer, the KBAR BK KB. And I think that's why that particular brand of knife was chosen over other kinds. Let me know if you have a different theory. And he is innocent until proven guilty. But I am talking about this case in terms of Bryan Kohberger because he's the only one on trial. He's the only one who's been indicted. And all of the motions and information that's coming out is in relation to him going to trial. And jury selection starts on July 30th. So I think he was hanging out at the University of Idaho campus because he was attracted to Maddie and possibly also Kaylee. I think Maddie does resemble Kimberly, the girl he had a crush on in school. And I think that his TapaTalk posts were an early indicator that he was viewing not only himself as an organic sack of meat, but starting to see other people that way too, which is a problem in my opinion. So I think he was already showing signs of depersonalization. And I think his early interest when he first went to school for psychology is interesting because I think he was trying to figure himself out. But I think when he switched into criminology, it wasn't who he was, it was who he wanted to be when he flipped into criminology. So that brings me to this how-to essay that is coming in as evidence. Let me check in with chat. I know I'm behind. I'm so sorry. We still have a couple more things to get into, but I do want to check in and just say hello to chat and just see if you guys have any questions or comments. Jewel says it's so bad. That's how they think. They have no empathy. Hey, Mace. Mace said sometimes sci-fi and games he plays are attractive to people who fail at life and coping emotionally. Robots don't have feelings, so there's an appeal there. Yeah, very interesting. Shelley said everything he did was intentional. I think so too. I think that the knife that he chose was intentional. I think he wanted to be the KB or KBAR killer with a K. That's what he wanted to be, and it would have gone along with his own initials. And I think that the more he studied criminology, the fact that he was so interested in it, showed that not who he wanted to be or who he was, which was the psychology, which was not who he wanted to be. He was looking at who he was. Who am I? But the criminology was, who can I become? Who can I be? So I hope that makes sense. Holly said, it's scary. Yeah, it is. Virginia says, I really want them to have the right person. That's why I've been watching so much on this case. It seems like odd he would drive his own car there. Well, it does seem odd, except if you think about it, what did he do 5 days after the crime? He changed his car tags. So he knew he was changing his car tags. He knew he was going back to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. So, why not drive your own car? By driving your own car, the benefits are you have control of the vehicle. You can clean it as many times as you want to. You can clean it over and over as meticulously as you want to. And remember, law enforcement didn't arrest him until December 30th. So he had over 6 weeks, almost 7 weeks, to clean that car as many times as he wanted to. So I think for somebody who had OCD, that he would have really wanted to have control over that. He could Dexter it out the way that he wanted to. And then we're going to go into this how-to essay next, because I think this is coming in to the trial. The defense didn't want it to. The judge ruled it would come in. And Kathy said, I think he planned this most of his life. And brother Mike said, yeah, go on to the next victims. Marcus said, maybe he was watching a Rambo movie. I don't think so. I do think that the KBAR knife had significance. And I think that the significance is his initials, Bryan Kohberger, BK. And remember, who was he studying with? What professor? The one who wrote the book about BTK, right? Which is Dennis Rader, who named himself. And I told you guys that this was really common for these guys to also want to interact and taunt people, which is why I do believe that the Pappa Rogers account was related back to Bryan Kohberger. I think that is why we have the meta warrant. I think they are going to tie this account back to him. I do believe he was in the chat interacting with us, and this is not uncommon. Dennis Rader also was taunting. Now, he was, of course, using newspapers and interacting with law enforcement that way, right? But if you think about it, how would you interact with people today? It wouldn't be through a newspaper. It would be through social media. So it makes sense that the Pappa Rogers, which would have been a nod, in my opinion, a hat tip to Elliot Rodger by Bryan Kohberger, to do that and to interact with people and to be superior to other people, um, and taunt other people and to taunt law enforcement too. Me, myself, and I says, I believe there was some video of BK's car with the plate and his actually being seen the trial. Yeah, I think so too. Ann Taylor worked really hard trying to keep the videos from coming into evidence. There's 12 hours of raw footage. I have people come into the comment section telling me, what about the Linda Lane footage, this or that? It doesn't matter. We haven't seen most of the footage. So what I say is, let's see the footage, because I think that law enforcement is going, that 12 hours of raw footage that Ann Taylor says that we should exclude that, Judge. We should exclude that as evidence, because I don't have time to go through 12 hours of raw footage. I don't think that dog is going to hunt with this particular judge. I think that he is going to, imagine the precedent that would set. That if anybody, imagine you had a crime committed against you, and you were, um, robbed, and there was video of the person robbing you, and all the defense had to say was, well, I don't have time to go through the video, therefore this video should be excluded. That's not going to hunt with this judge. I just don't think he's going to go for that. But let me know if you have a different opinion, because we don't all have to agree. We're not going to all agree on every single case, and it's okay. This channel is a channel for people who are critical thinkers, who like to have all of the information so that they can make up their own mind. Like said, I read BTK chose houses with the number 3 in the address. Yeah, so there was a method to everything that he was doing, right? He was thinking through everything that he was going to do. And it's the same thing, I believe, in this case. I think that in this case, I think that everything was thought out, from the type of the fact that this KBAR knife was chosen, to the date, November 13th of 2022, the party weekend, having November and 13th, which is, and that page of 118, having that manifesto of Elliot Rogers. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you guys can back up the chat and watch that part. You will want to watch it, or you can watch when we're done. Leslie said, has anyone noticed that his shirt was not buttoned all the way to the top? Oh, you're talking about the blue shirt? Yeah, I did. I saw that he had the blue shirt on. They took him out of the suit. So we saw this in the Jodi Arias trial. We saw this in the Casey Anthony trial too, where, when people go on trial, they play around with different looks. Jodi Arias went from being like a blonde bombshell, with just, everything pushed up and out, to looking like a librarian with brown hair and buttoned up clothes and glasses on. She looked like a mousy librarian by the time they got done redoing her. And I think we're seeing something similar happening in this case, where they tried the suits and now they're trying out just putting him like in a blue shirt. They've lowered his chair. We saw that in the Casey Anthony trial too. They lowered her chair so that, she just would look like she wasn't capable of it. And we already have Ann Taylor making noises that this guy couldn't be capable of this, but yet we have him saying himself that he's capable of it. We know that he used the Strava app to run a 6-minute mile. And we know that the Strava app, there is a warrant for it. So it's going to show he was physically capable, A. But B, it also acts like a GPS. And, to me, that could either exonerate or implicate Bryan Kohberger if it shows him with the Strava app on his phone and it runs in the background. Now, during the crime scene, the prosecution is adamant that the phone was turned off. So I haven't heard Ann Taylor say anything different. And Ann Taylor has said in her motion that Cy Ray is going to provide a partial alibi. But the judge said very clearly that Bryan Kohberger could get on the stand. So was that a hint on how he's going to rule on the alibi? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Mimi says, what is crazy is he comes from such a wonderful, wonderful family. Yeah, his dad was a janitor, and his mom was a special needs teacher, and both his sisters are psychologists. Christy said, I think so too, Brother Mike. Christy says that. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Eve loves God. Holly said, he looks squirrely in court now. He looks very small. You know, for those of you that were watching the hearing with me, I don't talk during the hearing. I know some commentators do like to talk, and that's fine if that's what you like. I don't like to have it when I'm trying to listen to something to have people talking over at me, but I like the idea of watching it with somebody. So what I'm doing is I just put up whatever they're talking about and then whatever the judge just ruled. So I just put up, this is what they're, discussing the topic for like 30 seconds. And then I put up, once the judge made his decision, I flash that up on the screen. This is what the judge ruled on this, or he's going to rule on it later. So I just thought, but what you guys didn't see if you were watching that is I was talking to the chat, when we weren't watching it. Sometimes I was just watching it, but sometimes I was interacting, and we were talking about how much that chair got lowered for Bryan Kohberger, that he was looking smaller than the attorney, or even the same size as the attorney that he was sitting next to. And we're discussing whether this was an intentional act. And somebody said, next up we're going to see him, sitting on the floor with a pacifier in his mouth. So I do think, there's some manipulation that goes on. We saw it in the Jodi Arias trial. We saw it with Casey, in the jury let Casey Anthony. She was found not guilty. She did not get convicted for what happened to her daughter, Kaylee Marie. So, but they made her look like a school marm. She went from looking like a party girl to a school marm, and they put her seat down really, really low. So she looked really, really small, like she couldn't have possibly have committed a crime like this. All right. Thank you, Vintage Peacock. Just thanks for the updates and continued hard work. Thank you so much. I do spend hours and hours putting together live streams to try to look up new information, but also to try to connect the dots for you guys. And I just really, really appreciate your encouragement. Thank you so, so much, Vintage Peacock. Thank you, Njaz, for gifting a Reporter Room membership. That is so kind of you. Njaz, if you has gifted quite a few Reporter Room memberships, you guys. And thank you to Shannon. She says antisocial personality disorder, not autistic. I am wondering the same thing. I know that the prosecution, we didn't hear this addressed as much as I was hoping to, but I know the prosecution wants an independent person to verify whether or not he's autistic. But we do know that the judge did rule that sociopath and psychopath cannot be used at the trial. He didn't say anything about antisocial personality disorder, but I suspect unless they have a diagnosis of him having that, I don't think the prosecution would be able to characterize him in that way. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And thank you so much, KB, for the $1 super chat. That is so nice of you. Thank you so, so much. All right, so let's continue on together, shall we? Because we still have a lot to unpack, and I don't want to run out of time. All right, so let's talk about this how-to essay. So many people believe that Bryan Kohberger wanted to become infamous, that when he switched from studying psychology, where he was asking why he was this way, to switching to studying criminology, to, well, this is what I want to be. This is who I was, psychology. This is what I want to be, criminology, that he wanted to become infamous, that he wanted to become famous for committing crimes like this. Allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty. And we consider that he wrote this essay in one of his classes on, quote, how to cover your tracks at a crime scene. So let's look at this together and just consider this, along with the fact that the jury will see this, and Taylor tried to keep it out. The judge is letting it in. But we know that he bought the balaclava ski mask, the KBAR knife, the KBAR knife sheath, the knife sharpener, and, let's look at this essay together. Okay. Let me grab a sip of water. Okay, so he did have a deep understanding of crimes. So the sourcing on this is blast, but they are citing the New York Post. I could not get the New York Post to come up because New York Post requires a subscription, like you have to be logged in. So I didn't know how they would feel about me sharing their article, so I'm sharing this one instead. But it's pretty much sourced from the New York Post. So according to the New York Post, in an unsettling essay, BK, and you don't have to take my word for it because the prosecution made a motion. And if you watch the hearing, which I have the whole hearing on my channel, this was weird. I had one or two people come into my comment section telling me that I should watch the hearing. And I was kind of confused because I thought not only did we watch the hearing together as a true crime community on this channel, but I have the whole hearing up on my channel. So I don't know what that was. That was weird. But anyway, they said that BK detailed how crime scene investigators use, quote, fiber-free overalls, gloves, and booties to prevent contaminating evidence with their own DNA and fingerprints. So he really did know how to do this, in my opinion. Doesn't mean he did it, but it shows that he knew how to do this and to minimize how much DNA. Does this mean he was a genius? No, because he left the knife sheath behind, and that knife sheath, according to what I've heard about the reviews, that snap was known to stick. And I think that's how his DNA got under there. I think he wiped the knife sheath clean and just missed a little bit on the snap. He also explored multi-facets of crime scene investigation and repeatedly stressed the importance of safeguarding the area from contamination. Furthermore, he pointed out that domestic partners are often the primary suspects in criminal cases. In another part of the essay, BK discussed how perpetrators might introduce items into the crime scene to mislead investigators. And this makes me wonder, Fox News was wondering, so that's my sourcing on that, if the unknown male DNA could be something he left behind himself. That's what Fox News was questioning. So I'm not saying that that's what happened, but he certainly knew enough. He wrote a paper about it, about how perpetrators might introduce items into a crime scene to mislead investigators. He also cautioned investigators into making hasty conclusions in such scenarios. He wrote, quote, if there was an item introduced to the scene by an offender to throw off investigators, it's not the job of the criminal investigator processing the crime scene to jump to conclusions. This is Bryan Kohberger writing this. Speaking about the essay, crime scene expert Joseph Giacalone claimed that it would be one of the key pieces of evidence against BK in upcoming trial. Well, Ann Taylor did try to keep it out, but the judge did rule that this essay will be coming before the jury. Prosecutors are going, this is Joseph, he's a NYPD cold case investigator. He said prosecutors are going to talk about this when they bring up the lack of forensic evidence left by the K and the iller with a K, watching my words. He added, just in case you have little ones in the room, he added, they're going to say, quote, look how much he knew about this. He talks about fiber-free clothing. That's not helpful for him. Giacalone also noted that BK's essay might explain why police were only able to recover a minimal forensic evidence, suggesting that he tried to cover his tracks. So imagine how horrified he would have been when he got home and realized he didn't have his knife sheath. And, why was his phone pinging at that house at 9 a.m. the following morning? A lot of, people have asked that. Was he just going back to relive the crime? I don't think he was expecting Maddie and Kaylee to be in the same room. Was there some type of SA gratification going on? I'm watching my words. But he noted that BK's essay might explain why police were only able to recover a minimal amount of forensic evidence. Let me know what you think about this. However, despite the knife still being missing, the police did find a sheath at the crime scene that contained his DNA. So, whoops. So prosecutors have since theorized. So where did the knife go? I think that's what the jury's going to want to know. Where is your knife? Where's your knife sheath? Where are they? Because they weren't in the search of his Pullman apartment. They didn't find anything there. They didn't find a knife or knife sheath at his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania home. They didn't find a knife or knife sheath at his office. They didn't find a knife or knife sheath in his Hyundai Elantra. So prosecutors have theorized that BK had brought the knife to and the sheath on Amazon and was intend to show his shopping history at trial. Ann Taylor also tried to keep that out. She didn't want the jury to see that. We heard one of the defense team members arguing that, and the judge said they were trying to say the algorithm made him do it. It suggested it to him. That's why. And the judge said the algorithm doesn't put the item in your cart. The algorithm doesn't pay for the item. So that's coming in. And I think the jury's going to want to know, where's your knife? Where's your knife sheath? So according to court documents, BK also purchased a black balaclava nearly a year before. And again, this by itself doesn't mean that much, but the fact that it's the similar mask than what Dylan drew to law enforcement is interesting. Remember, BK wasn't identified by law enforcement until December 19th. Prosecutors also revealed that BK bought the face covering on January 10th of 2022 at Dick's Sporting Goods in Pittsburgh, 11 months before the crimes. So they also point to BK's shopping history, which includes purchasing the KBAR knife, a sheath, and a sharpener approximately 8 months before these crimes. So I think he was thinking about these crimes for a long time. I think he thought about it. I think he conditioned for it. I think he got himself to the point where he could run a 6-minute mile. He got in shape for it. I think he would have practiced. And I think that, the crimes didn't sound like what we thought they sounded like. And people were like, how could he have done away with Kaylee Maddie? And the roommates didn't hear. And, and my question is, okay, but Ethan and Xana didn't hear it either. So I just don't think either sound doesn't travel in the house the way we think it does, or the crimes didn't sound like what we thought. And if you think about how you could silence somebody quickly, it would be starting here, wouldn't it? Start here and then continue. But I do think that KBAR knife was selected intentionally because of the letters K and B. Let me know what you think. So the knife sheath containing Kohberger's DNA was recovered at the crime scene, and Dylan said she saw a man wearing a similar mask. She described one. Previously, it was revealed that BK's family may testify after his trial. Now, Ann Taylor stood up and said they don't want to testify for the prosecution. Well, of course they don't. I get it. But they are going to sit there and ask them. This is what I believe is going to happen when BK's family takes a stand. I think they're going to be asked about the shopping. Did you purchase a KBAR knife on Amazon? Yes or no? Did you purchase a KBAR knife sheath on Amazon? Yes or no? Did you, because he's saying it's a family account, but we also learned during the hearing that it was a family account, but the person who bought it, the named person on that family account was Bryan Kohberger. It wasn't his mother. It wasn't his father. It was his name on it. And that's why I think also law enforcement went in to find out how he paid for it and pulled all of those receipts also. So I think they're going to show that he did purchase this KBAR knife, that the KBAR knife is now gone, that the knife sheath was found underneath and to the side of Maddie, that he went shopping for another knife after the crimes were committed. Where's his knife? Where did your knife go? Where did your knife sheath go? That's what the jury's going to wonder. And I think he was thinking about this for a long time. I don't think this was something that he decided at the spur of the moment. I think he planned this for a good long while. And I think that the date of November 13th of 2022, the number 13 and the month November was a hat tip to Elliot Rogers. And that's why that was listed as page 118 being underlined, specifically listed that in the items that were recovered during the search warrant. Why would you list out a book with a page underlined? Because there's something there that links it back, in my opinion, to the date. So I think that's the page that is underlined. We'll see at the trial. So his family did not want to testify, but I do think the prosecution has no choice. They have to put them on because they have to show that, there's no doubt whatsoever that Bryan Kohberger is the one that purchased this knife. They're going to show he purchased the knife. They're going to show the jury how he paid for it. And then they're going to put his family on the stand one by one to see if they bought this knife. Now, the prosecution doesn't want Bryan Kohberger's family to be allowed to sit in at the trial. I didn't think the judge would not let them come in. The prosecution just wants to call them for witnesses, but I think the judge is going to split the baby here. And just listening to how he was responding to this, I think what he's going to do is he's going to allow the family members to come into the trial, because it is going to be 3 months long. But I think he's also going to they are going to have to take the stand. So maybe not for the whole trial, and maybe take them out of order, so that, they hear from the jury hears from the families members. So take them out of order. I think he'll do something like that, but we don't know yet. He hasn't ruled on that one yet. So in her objection to granting BK's family priority seating, Jennings, this is Ashley Jennings, one of the prosecutors argued that the accused relatives do not possess the same legal rights as the victims' families. So, she's not wrong, but I think the judge is going to let them come in. I mean, the family, it's not their fault. And they're going to want to support their son. Let me know what you think if you have a different take on it than what I did. So let's go through. Let me grab this. Let's go through everything that the judge did decide, all of his rulings. That what didn't want it to be allowed at all. The judge said it would. All right, so here they are. The judge ruled that absent expert testimony, that there would be no use of the terms psychopath and sociopath. The prosecution said they weren't planning to use those terms anyway. Number two, the defense team didn't want the M word, doing away with someone with an M, to be allowed to describe the allegations and charges. The judge said that what didn't want it to be allowed at all. The judge said it would absolutely be allowed to describe allegations and charges. Number three, the state wanted the defense not to claim that the state was trying to do away with Bryan Kohberger. She used the K word in a recent hearing, and the judge said, agreed, and said that ruled that no argumentative statements by counsel would be acceptable. Number four, the defense wanted Bryan Kohberger's paper, the how to not leave evidence behind, that he wrote while he was at DeSales College. The defense did not want that to be allowed into the trial. The judge overruled them and said that the prosecution can present the how-to essay. Number five, the defense wanted the Amazon searches excluded and cited 404 rule. The judge said this is not included in 404, and the defense searches for the KBAR, the Amazon searches for the KBAR knife, KBAR knife sheath, KBAR knife sharpener, those would all come in. Number six, the traffic stop, which took place on August 21st of 2022. The defense did not want the traffic stop video to be played for the jury. The judge said that it was not unfairly prejudicial. He said the defense does not get to tell the state how to try their case. He said that the 404B does not apply to the traffic stop video. So he ruled that the prosecution can present the traffic stop video, but the judge may require some things to be redacted. Now, to be clear, we have not seen this traffic stop yet. We haven't seen it yet. We don't know. This is not the one that I played on my channel where he talks himself out of a ticket with the crosswalk incident. This is a different one that we don't know. We don't know anything about. I do want to say thank you before we're going to continue on with this, but I do want to say thank you. I should have done this sooner. I want to say thank you to our producers, Enjaz, Sasha, Angel, George Brown, and Pepper. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our channel members too. We're not done. We're going to go through the rest of these judges' rulings, so you have them all. And we did, for those of you that didn't get to see the hearing, it was very interesting. I did divide it up into morning, afternoon, and then just kind of a recap at the end. I bookmarked it for you guys, so you guys can go through that. It definitely is worth watching. And during the breaks, I went through other things. So it is a very interesting hearing, and I did a pre-show as well. So thank you to all our Cheeto members for your support, and thank you for your super thanks and coffee gratitude, Brother Mike and Jazz, Free to Be Me, Allison Cosgrove, Jory Johnson. Thank you, gifted channel memberships, and Jazz, Six Sense Amelia, and Jazz, and Six Sense Amelia, Kami, Green Eye Sparkle, Vintage Peacock, Long Island Hillbilly, Patricia Warner, Brian Harold, and Green Eyes Sparkle. Thank you so much for all your super stickers, super thanks, and coffee gratitude. Really, really appreciate it. Okay, let's go back to this. So this is just a recap of the hearing, of just what his rulings were at the end. And number 7, the defense wanted Bryan Kohberger's family to have the same rights to be in the courtroom as victim's family. The defense said that Bryan Kohberger's family had no desire to testify at the trial and wanted an order that prevents the prosecution from calling Bryan Kohberger's family as witnesses. The judge ruled that the prosecution can call Bryan Kohberger's family as witnesses. He's going to take it under advisement, but he will issue ultimately. It sounded. Let me rephrase that. The judge said he was going to take it under advisement. It did sound like Bryan Kohberger's family was going to be allowed to testify, but just out of order. But he didn't decide anything yet. He was going to take it under advisement. I also expect, this is a speculation on my part, that he will allow Bryan Kohberger's family to be at the trial. Number 8, Bryan Kohberger's autism disorder as an aggravating factor. The defense wanted an order that prohibited the state from using Bryan Kohberger's autistic characteristics against him. The judge said regarding the penalty phase that he would do a jury instruction during the penalty phase. The prosecution said they have no plans to use Bryan Kohberger's autism at all during the penalty phase. The defense wants guidelines for the prosecution to be set by the judge. They, came back with that. The judge ruled that the state shall not make the diagnosis of autism as an aggravating factor. Prosecution sounded like they didn't have a problem with this. The IgG DNA, there was 3 motions regarding DNA. The defense wants the judge to require the prosecution to make a proffer as to what the witness is going to testify about. The judge said the prosecution and the defense can sit down and work this out together. The prosecution didn't know what the prosecution wanted the record to reflect that the state did nothing ethically wrong. The judge said he has not made a finding that the state did anything inappropriate. This is on the heels of accusations made by Ann Taylor and the defense team, and the judge urged them to work it out between the defense and the prosecution. So the prosecution didn't do anything wrong. I hope that's clear. The judge is the neutral party that gets to decide this, not me, not you guys. Not the defense, not the prosecution. He's the neutral party that gets to decide this. And he says the prosecution didn't do anything wrong. So for people who are saying, that, and he did call Ann Taylor on the carpet. I had people saying, you didn't watch the hearing. I not only watched it, but I aired it on my channel. And I literally showed the judge saying these things in the video that I put up yesterday. So if you haven't checked that out, you'll want to. But he admonishes Ann Taylor and he describes the motion that featured Cy Ray as a quote unquote conspiracy theory. So anyway, let's continue on together, shall we? And I'm not saying anything bad about Cy Ray. I don't know what he wrote that in relation to, but because it was ultimately Ann Taylor's choice to put it in there. I don't know if he knew about it or not, but there has been some kind of other motion, but it's been sealed, so we can't see it. But we'll get to see it at the trial. So we'll find out what's really going on there very, very soon. But some people were saying that the judge was admonishing Ashley Jennings. No, he was not. He was talking to the defense team, Ann Taylor. He was talking about their motion and what they wrote. And I would just urge you, if you didn't understand that, to go back and watch the hearing in its full context. Number 10, alternative perpetrator theory. The state is concerned that the defense is going to focus on specific individuals. They wanted an order that prevented the defense from implicating specific individuals without giving prior notice to the prosecution. The judge said that the defense must make a factual showing that connects the person or persons that they're planning to use as alternative suspects, that they have to be connected to the case. And he does not want this to be done during the trial. He wants the defense to provide proffers during pretrial, and he would set a date to take care of that. Number 11, the DNA that was found underneath Maddie's fingernails and the DNA found on the knife sheath. Let's start with Maddie's fingernails. Defense did not want the statistical analysis, the likelihood ratio, to be allowed. The defense did not want the prosecution to be allowed to present inconclusive, that's their characterization of DNA evidence found underneath Maddie's fingernails. The judge asked the defense, do you want me to believe your expert or their expert? Is kind of how he phrased it. You're just, in other words, you have an expert, they have an expert. It'll be up to the jury to decide. The defense claims that the prosecution was misrepresenting the likelihood ratio data, and the defense didn't want a battle of the experts. The prosecution fired back, stating that the likelihood ratio falls within the buffer zone. And the judge said that the perpetrator may have been clothed in such a way that prevents his DNA from being under Maddie's fingernails. He just offered that up, so I thought that was interesting. The prosecution said that their expert is not willing to testify that Bryan Kohberger is excluded from the DNA underneath Maddie's fingernails. So the judge said he's not going to tell the state how to ask their questions, and the defense can object, and the judge will respond accordingly. So the DNA and the likelihood ratio regarding Maddie's fingernails will come into the trial. So remember, if this was really exculpatory for Bryan Kohberger, why would the defense team be fighting so hard to keep it out? If it was really helpful to them, because it was inconclusive, it, doesn't show any likelihood ratio. If it really is inconclusive, and I've seen people explaining that you can have different labs have different findings, but obviously the defense does not like the likelihood ratio that it is Bryan Kohberger's DNA that the prosecution is planning to present. Do we know what that is? No, not yet, but we will during the trial. Next, let's talk about the touch DNA. The defense didn't want the words touch DNA to be allowed. The judge pointed out that the defense team's own expert was using the word touch DNA. The judge said he expects the defense expert to tell the jury this if they want that before it. The prosecution also pointed out that the defense's own expert used the term touch DNA. The judge said he doesn't tell experts what words to use. The judge will allow the word touch DNA. He does encourage both sides not to use the term as much as they can, but he said the jury is more than competent to understand the words touch DNA in context, and he said he will give the jury an instruction if both the defense and prosecution can agree on an instruction. Next, number 10, the defense did not want the prosecution to use the term suspect vehicle number 1 because the videos that show the Hyundai Elantra are not continuous. The prosecution said the jury should be allowed to view the vehicle and that the expert opinion should be allowed. The judge will allow the term suspect vehicle 1 to be used at the trial. Number 12, the defense does not want Dylan to be able to use the words bushy eyebrows during the trial. They say Dylan was drinking and that she was influenced by law enforcement regarding the balaclava mask description. They described Dylan as an unreliable witness. The prosecution says that the misidentified did not happen because the suspect was covered head to toe, dressed all in black. They said that Dylan did give a consistent description of the perpetrator. And the judge will take this under advisement. So we do not have a ruling on the bushy eyebrows yet. I suspect the bushy eyebrows will be allowed in, but we'll see. It's up to the judge, not for me to decide. Number 13, the defense does not want the 911 call and text messages to be let into evidence during the trial. The judge asked about the 911 call. The judge is going to take it statement by statement approach to the 911 call and the text messages. The judge said the surviving roommates were under stress, and the judge said he will write this to provide more guidance. He said also that it would be interesting to hear testimony from the two young ladies, referring to Dylan and Bethany. Number 14, demonstrative evidence, and they're talking about the model that the prosecution wants to present, a model of the 1122 King Road home, which was torn down. The prosecution plans to use a model for witnesses to show, for the roommates or for law enforcement to show where they found certain things or how things happened. The judge said that the model could be used as a part of witness testimony. The defense described it as a dollhouse, and characterized it as an unfair surprise. The judge pushed back on the defense, saying that it's the same as if a sketch of the home was drawn in court. The prosecution said that Ann Taylor complains about the FBI data and scale of the model, but ultimately the judge is going to allow the model of the 1122 King Road home to come into the trial. Number 15, the judge said the self-authentication needs to wait. So that's coming in another day. Number 16, alibi. The prosecution does not want Bryan Kohberger to be able to offer a partial alibi. The prosecution said the alibi issue has gone back and forth since 2023. They said they have never received a place, a time, a witness that Bryan Kohberger plans to rely on. This is, according to Idaho state law, the prosecution does not want Cy Ray to be able to testify where Bryan Kohberger was at the time that Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana were done away with, because Bryan Kohberger's phone was turned off. The defense said Bryan Kohberger was out driving around. The judge said that Bryan Kohberger could testify to this. So that, I thought that was really interesting. It kind of gave us a sneak peek into what the judge is thinking there on that alibi, that, because the prosecution wants Bryan Kohberger to get on the stand, and it is against, the law in Idaho does say that you have to have like a specific time and a place for an alibi. And the prosecution is saying the defense, one, never provided it, and two, when they did provide it, they just have him out driving around in the car. There's not a specific time or place, and and three, they say that his phone was turned off during the crimes. And then four, they said even Ann Taylor cannot say it's anything more than a partial alibi. And if you look at her motion, it's titled partial alibi right there in one of the paragraphs. So she even is saying she can't give a full alibi. So the judge did say that Bryan Kohberger could take the stand. So I thought that was really, really interesting, and really, really going to be curious to see what the judge does on that. I do need to end it there. I do want to say thank you. Hi, Amelia. I'm doing the Sebastian Rogers case next. Amelia's one of our head mods, along with Enjaz and brother Mike. Thank you to all of our mods. There's Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our mods today, all of our channel members, all of our subscribers. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to go over right now, and we're going to do the Sebastian Rogers case next. So come on over and follow me. And I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And if you're the kind of viewer who is a critical thinker, who likes to have all of the information so you can make up your own mind, then you are in the right place. And I will see you on the next live stream. Take care. Bye.